For more on this, we can bring in international affairs commentator Douglas Herbert.
Hi,
Doug,
Catherine.
welcome. So, as we were just listening there to President Zelensky, we know his top priorities are weapons, especially these long range missiles we've been discussing, cash, and sanctions on Russia. So, how likely is this summit to deliver some or all of this?
Look, Volodymyr Zelensky, unlikely to get everything he wants. Some of what he wants, a very little bit of what he wants, he will get. The main thing here is, look, I know that every point in this war has been for Zelensky a pivotal juncture. There's not any one meeting that's less important than another. But there's a sense of absolute critical juncture here. Why? Because as we heard Zelensky himself say, he sees it. He knows Putin's determination to wage this war. He sees no sign from Russia, Vladimir Putin, and the leadership there of ending this war and anything short of Russia's terms, which for Ukraine are capitulation. So what can he do to get Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table? Because they haven't gone so far for ceasefire talks. Well, the only way to do it in Zelensky's mind is to put pressure on Putin. Now, you can debate whether or not there's anything that could put enough pressure on Putin to get him to the negotiating table. Putin himself has said that pressure tactics never work, and that's not the way a country is brought to a table. But that said, that is why he is on, I would call it a desperation mission in a sense. He needs more money. He doesn't have enough of that. He needs more weapons. These long-range missiles are absolutely crucial. In the past few days, the Ukrainian, armed services, the general staff of the Ukrainian armed forces said that they hit a Russian plant in Bryansk on Russian soil, a plant that produced both explosives and rocket fuel. Now, this is exactly the type of strike. This was done with a British-supplied Storm Shadow cruise missile. Why is this so important? Because this is exactly the type of weapon that Zelensky says he needs more of. Not tomorrow, yesterday, actually. So he has some, right? He has the Storm Shadows. He has French Scalp missiles. He was going to have the U.S. Tomahawks. Those don't seem to be happening right now. Ukraine itself produces some of its own missiles. It produces Flamingo and Neptune missiles. They have been used for strikes both on Russian soil and in Russian-occupied Crimea. All important. He needs more. What does he really want? He wants the German missiles. Germany has a long-range missile called the Taurus. It's a weapon Germany has been reluctant to give, and its chancellor says the reason being, or the reason believed, is that it doesn't want to provoke Putin. This has been the whole narrative from the West throughout the war. When they have refused to give a certain category of weapons, it's always been, we don't want to escalate with Putin. We don't want to escalate this war. It sounds logical. It sounds reasonable, except that you can also argue that everything's escalated enough with Putin. There's no such thing as escalating more with Vladimir Putin. So Zelensky's in that bind right now. It's really that. He has to act grateful and strike a very grateful, thankful note every time he meets with these Western leaders, whether it was yesterday in Brussels with the European leaders or today in London with the so-called Coalition of the Willing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. But he goes home knowing that he has nowhere near what he really needs to put that requisite pressure to bear on Putin, and he needs more money. Europeans are giving him for now 2 years' worth of financing. Okay, that's good. He needs a lot more money, and he needs it now. Actually, he needs it yesterday.
Now, Doug, you mentioned the Russian president there, Vladimir Putin. You also mentioned the U.S. Tomahawk missiles, which he, had hoped to get from Donald Trump, and he didn't. So these two leaders are sort of, they're not at the summit. They're looming over the summit. Where do we go from here, and how much impact are they having over all of these discussions?
They are the discussions, essentially. They're the two twin elephants in the room of those discussions. Europe on its own, we have said it time and again, there's no breaking news in this, cannot do it alone. All the goodwill in the world is for naught without the full-fledged, full-throated support of the United States, which it doesn't have right now. Yes, the U.S. has this plan, which is an indirect plan to sell weapons to Europe, which then provides and supplies those weapons to Ukraine. That is far short of what has come under the previous administration, which was full-throated support, standing with Ukraine shoulder to shoulder. So without the U.S. support, and with Putin, on the other hand, saying explicitly that he is not going to end this war until the so-called root causes are addressed, nothing is going to change. So you have these two leaders in this sort of vicious circle, this dynamic that just seems to go around in circles. And until something changes in that basic dynamic and someone blinks, nothing is going to change. You could have 10,000 meetings of the Coalition of the Willing in London or other cities. It's not going to make a real difference until something in the calculus of Washington or Putin on one side or the other, Washington or Moscow, changes in a fundamental sense. We haven't seen that so far. Doesn't mean these meetings aren't valuable in and of themselves. They should be taking place. They need to be taking place, but they are not going to be the key to any longer-term solution.
Doug, thank you so much for sharing your analysis. That's France 24's international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert.